Good morning, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. It's been a while since we have got together on live stream. But today I wanted to uh, go through the 10 Islamophobic moments of 2022. This is the third year that the Islamophobia Studies Center puts out this list. And I wanted to go through it with highlighting the uh, number one today, which we released, that speaks about the Islamophobia, rampant Islamophobia globally. So we wanted first to say that 2020, 2021, and 2022 list, the 10 list, will be sent out throughout our media email list in order to understand what is taking place. So number 10 this year was the bulldozer at an India, New Jersey event. So there was an event in New Jersey, California, not New Jersey, US, sorry, that had the bulldozer. And the symbol of the bulldozer these days in relations to India, that it was used to demolish Muslim homes in India, as the PGP and the Hindutva advocates are beginning to target Muslims systematically and using home demolition, business demolition, targeting Muslims in India. So that's the number 10 spot. The number 9 spot, the Representative Lauren Boebert video leaks. In an early December, a group of 30 Muslim Capitol Hill staffers wrote a letter on calling on House leadership to categorically reject the comments that Representative Laura Boebert have said in relations to Muslims. So again, it speaks about this prevalence of Islamophobic comment from segments within the Republican Party. So that's our number 10, our number 9 list for this year. Number 8, Georgetown law professor. The students' allegations against Professor Susan Diller Ross at a Georgetown Law Center, who teaches women's human rights and information law, including providing legal documents advocating for hijab ban. So again, the discussions about hijab ban continues to be one of those issues. So we have in Georgetown law professor engaging in such comment. Number 7, the U.S. midterm election. So the 2022 U.S. midterm election saw the entry back again of Islamophobia targeting Muslim candidates. In particular, we could speak about the Irvine city mayor who's been targeted on Islamophobic campaign. We could say of the Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, as well as others, Aisha Wahab here in Northern California, targeted with Islamophobic content. So we see the re-emergence and reintroduction of Islamophobia in the election. Number 10 is number 6 is India hijab raw or hijab focus on hijab. Again, women in various schools and in society were being targeted, that hijab should be banned from schools, that Muslims who are Muslim women who are wearing the hijab should not be allowed to actually wear their hijab in such settings. So that's also in India in relations to the hijab. And number 5 is also related to hijab, with this the French hijab ban. And the French Senate in January voted 160 to 143 to ban the women wearing the hijab and other ostensible religious symbols in sports competitions, and there's a whole also prohibition on wearing the burkini. So there's this constant focus on the hijab in the French discourse. And then in number 4, civilian attacks or French civilian attacks that are targeting Muslims. A video was circulated on the internet which showed an unarmed man in France attacking 2 young women. One of the women was wearing the hijab. And just yesterday, we had the attack on the Kurdish community center in Paris. So now, within the French context, we're seeing violence targeting Muslims as part of this focus on the Muslim subject in general. And then number 3 is the auctioning Muslim women. In here, it's related to India as well, where this app that was used to try to actually engage in really, I don't know what to say other than one of the most pernicious representation of targeting Muslim women in the Indian context, again with this auctioning that became an international story and a focus on again the women, Muslim women in hijab. And number 2, in India, PGP spokesperson insulting the Prophet and making really a way to focus on the Prophet ﷺ, demonization of the Prophet Muhammad in the discourse. So that's number 2 in terms of its this Islamophobic movement. Now today we're going to put the number 1 moment for Islamophobic moment in 2022, and the number 1 spot this year. It's focused on the FIFA World Cup and the coverage. And it's not because it is the most violent or it has the most not demonized, but the most malicious, but because it's wide scope of impact. The second, that it was persistent and lasting many weeks, ongoing. And it also dredged up some of the most Orientalist, stereotypical, racist type of coverage, focusing on the Muslims. And this, the number 1 spot in terms of the FIFA World Cup began before the World Cup started, with this overemphasis on Muslims being distinctively not adhering to human rights, that the Muslims are in essence different. There are some legitimate issues to be debated and discussed about labor rights, and even in general about having a major athletic competition. This is not unique to Qatar. Every place where a major competition is held, there's often discussions about whether the investment is right or not, what are the impacts, and so on. But in this case, Qatar was specifically used as a symbolic representation of the Muslim other. And I wrote about how Islamophobia in relations to Qatar dealt with the Orientalist trope of Orientalist geography, where Muslim land, Muslim territories are dealt with differently. So in essence, that it was not discussed in relation to the norm, meaning that in different places where the World Cup or the Olympics have been held, these are the issues that human rights can point to. This is what takes place in terms of construction projects, and here's it. But in this case, Qatar was specifically dealt with in a way that pushed Islamophobia to the maximum, and began to really see Islamophobia as the way to actually engage in these demonizations. So it's the Orientalist geography, the focus on Qatar. The Qatar is different, and then the notion of that the Muslim world in relations to LGBTQ issues, which again is a subject that is a legitimate point of discussions and debates, but the Muslims were being held as contrary to the global environment that is taking place, and it was pushed with that narrative. So much so that some of the major news outlets were reaching out specifically for people to write negative stories with that framing in mind. Then we get into the discussions about the World Cup itself, projecting that they are on as soon as the discussions about prohibition of selling beer or alcohol in the stadiums, this was seen as a major violation, that Qatar and the Muslim world is out of step. And again, just to say that it is not a human right violation not to have access to beer or alcohol in the stadiums. Let's just be very clear, even though some who might be salesmen for Budweiser think that is the case. That is not the case. But other parts, again, one can critique Qatar for whatever notions in relations to whether it's the fan zones or the hotels, but those were actually were present in relations to access for alcohol. An indication so far, just yesterday, there was a report about, again, one of the most peaceful environments for peaceful environment for those who watched the World Cup. It was peaceful environment for families in the stadiums, that women were not harassed or by often drunken fans. Also, it was a wholesome environment for kids. We haven't registered any fights. In particular, if anyone follows the British soccer league and the British fans, usually you have to have a number of fights. So there was no fights that broke out. Also, there was speaking about that Qatar is ill prepared for transportation because, again, Muslims don't know how. That's the projection. The transportation actually was very, very well constructed and done, and a whole host of issues that were being problematized time and time again actually did not pan out. More importantly, there was a story, there are a number of stories that began to be put out to say that the cost for that the expenditure of Qatar on the World Cup and on the hosting cost close to 200 or $300 billion. So there was this notion. And let me step back to say that there's a persistent Orientalist, stereotypical framing around the Arab subject, in particular the Arab Sheikh and the Arab society. This is something Edward Said wrote about, Jack Shaheen in his Real Bad Arabs, and others, that the Arabs are so responsible that they're foolhardily in how they spend their money. They're responsible. They're spending lavishly. So there's this notion that they are all saying that this is, in essence, the Qatar and the Arabs are spending foolishly and so on, and that's how the cost of the World Cup. Again, I actually went back to look at Qatar's budget, which is about, I think, 65 billion per year. Actually, 56 billion that is for the 2022 years. And the notion that Qatar spent 200 to 300 billion is really outlandish number that is being put in there. But we need to look at it within a 10-year period. Most likely the figure that was used was a figure that was in Qatari riyal rather than in dollars. But everybody was using this as a way to say that they're just we're spending outlandishly. Part of it, in any place where a major athletic competition takes place, there is considerable investment. Again, whether you talk about Brazil in terms of hosting, whether you talk about South Africa, we're talking about London in terms of the UK, Japan, and Korea, Russia, China. So there's normative expenditures that takes place. But also in relations to the World Cup and Qatar, there was expenditures that were really on the drawing board for quite some time in terms of transportation system, the metro, the train, all that in there. But at the core of it is reigniting the Orientalist notion of the irresponsible Arab, that the Arab foolishly spending, that their generosity is a generosity that is made of a lack of responsibility. And as such, this irresponsibility points to a lack of intelligence and intellect. So we need to understand what is saying, that the Arab who is spending is really, even their generosity is being deemed as a problem rather than actually being seen or as a praiseworthy undertaking. Now, interestingly enough, the people who experienced the World Cup in Qatar spoke in a loving way about how their experience with Qatar is the experience with people, that people were offering them coffee as they come out from the cup, drinks in terms of families offering them regular drinks, offering them food. So in this sense, the demonization, Orientalist demonization, stereotypical demonization of the Arabs that folds into this type of coverage also is an Islamophobic aspect. Then the notion or the coverage that we see relative to the Moroccan team, which again takes us why the World Cup becomes the number one spot of the Islamophobic moments for the year, is the treatment of the Moroccan team in the Western press. Even though initially there was celebration that Morocco is making it out into the round of 16, making it from the round 16 to the round of 8, and making it to the semi-final, four teams to compete to make it to the final. We get Germany, of all places, using the Moroccan players in their dressing room, raising one finger up to the sky, saying, in essence, thanking God for their success. It's also an indication for often Muslims who say there's no God but one God, in terms of expressing their shahada, their profession of faith. And the picture of the players in the dressing room, underneath it, the German press put the picture of ISIS, and then, in essence, saying that the Moroccan players are replicating the same the allegiance that ISIS is doing with the raising of the one finger. So that was one of maybe a pernicious Islamophobic moment of it at the moment, the most joyful occurrence in the World Cup, not only for the Arab and Muslim world, but I would say much of the global South. This is the first time that an African, Arab, Muslim country makes it into the semi-final, makes it beyond the stage where only either European or South American team make it, that this is actually occurs. And much of the world was celebrating in the global South that Germany, of all countries, tries to, in essence, demonize the players and demonize the Moroccans. And that became, again, a way to think about that many of the players, not only Muslim, they would raise their fingers pointing to the scoring. So on, even Messi himself and others have had images and pictures of them raising their finger up to the sky. So would we say that they are making an allegiance or an oath to ISIS? What the Germans wanted, in essence, is to use the occasion of the Moroccan team success to try to remind the audience and remind the Western audience of ISIS. So in essence, the only way a Muslim could be seen is through the lens of terrorism. So in essence, what we understand the German press in using this is specifically to say that Muslims are only to be thought of in realm of terrorism. And in essence, they were reading the mind of the Moroccan team, in essence, saying that they were committing an act of allegiance to terrorism. So that's Germany, of all places. They should not be the ones to interpret the religious expressions of any group, considering their history of demonization. This was followed by the Danish TV channel News 2, which this reporter holds a picture of three monkeys, and in quote, in a joking way, saying that they stick together like the Moroccans and sticking together in Qatar with their mothers. So in essence, using the monkeys, the picture of the monkeys, in order to express a demonization, and also comparing the Moroccans to the monkeys. And I again said that the one who's holding the picture that does not know the difference between monkeys and Moroccans is the one that needs to be, actually they need to be examined, while the TV station apologized. The apology needed an apology, because the apology itself was an insulting apology. It basically said that that the perception of the audience, that this picture, this conversation created a perception of insult or discrimination, rather than actual being discriminatory and racist. And the second part of the apology said that this was an attempted joke, basically saying, one is your perception is wrong, or you got the wrong perception, and the second in this is that you are not understanding that this was a joke. Again, a joke or no joke, racism is racism. So they did not actually say that this was a racist occurrence. This was in no way anyone should be represented by such a picture, and for sure not the Moroccan community or the Moroccan players and so on. Then the TV station did not say this. In essence, they brushed it aside as a perception, an attempted joke, and that yes, you are hurt. Some of our audience are hurt by it, and as such, we regret that this have taken place. So the focus was not on the actual racism, but the focus is that the perception of the audience and so on. No one in the station was held responsible. No one was fired, no sensitivity training whatsoever. And compare this to Kyrie Irving and what he has been put through, or others, in this sense, once they carry on a specific type of act that is deemed to be racist and discriminatory. The other aspect relative to this story is also that no one apologized immediately. Nobody recognized that this was taking place and came on air immediately after the spot. It took the audience and those who were in the society to complain for the TV station to come, which means what was the editor doing? What were the writers in the room doing? What were the rest of the staff on the TV station doing? Basically, they took it as there's nothing wrong, and they needed the complaint for it to become an issue that they would respond to. So again, this was in relations to the Soccer World Cup, in relations to Moroccan players and how they were demonized by the German press, the Danish press, and then the final game and the dressing of Messi with the Bisht, that became the major issue with specifically both the British, some within the French, and some of the others, saying in essence that this was the worst, ruining the World Cup by Qatar, the Qatari Amir Tamim, dressing Messi with the Bisht, and this was completely unacceptable. Now, on the one hand, one can debate the discussion, discuss whether this was right or wrong, what time should it be done. Again, we're not going to be bent out of shape, but this became another element of saying that Qatar was irresponsible, that Qatar is, in essence, Qatar Amir is buying the World Cup and getting in there for a cultural force. Actually, in some coverage says that they forced this on Messi. And anyone that looked at the picture, which I did, Messi was raising his head up. He was being dressed. He did not take it as an offense or anything other than being honored by the Emir of Qatar, dressing him up with the Bisht. And so much so that, again, we could ask the Argentinian about their feelings. And so far, many Argentinians have actually saw this as one of the most significant moment of honoring Messi, and in essence saying that the Emir of Qatar dressing him up with this dish was a way to say that he is the greatest players, soccer players, and recognitions of this. Many Argentinians have purchased dish, those who were in Qatar trying to replicate this outfit. And I also saw that within the celebration that took place in Argentina as the team came back, there are people who were dressed in the Bish. There's a huge mural that is being painted of Messi with the World Cup and being dressed in the Bish. Diego Maradona was being also likewise represented with the headdress, the Arab headdress, and so on. So for those, in particular Europeans, British, French, and others that problematize this, it is coming down from this deep sense of Islamophobic discourse that was there pre-World Cup, during World Cup, post-World Cup, and use that occasion again to push this framing that the World Cup in Qatar is horrible, negative, and look what they did with Messi, and look what they did with dressing him up with the Bisht. Now, on this issue as well, you could see that the most favorable player award that was given to Messi, it has what Budweiser in there. So those who say that ruined the World Cup moment, how come a Budweiser logo on the most favorable player is acceptable and seen as not a sign of ruining the most favorite player award, but a cultural outfit that is given to him by the Emir is seen as ruining the World Cup. And if it is, again, forcing, I would say that Budweiser is forcing itself in the athletic competition as a way to try to have a brand disconnected from cultural heritage, nuance, and so on. While I would say that the offering of this, which is in Arab culture, is a symbolic representation of honor, dignity, royalty. This often, when somebody takes their cloak, the bisht or the ibaya, and put it on someone, is one of the highest forms of respect and honor that you give to people. So leave it to Western racist discourse to transform a significant cultural exchange moment to make it about them. So again, it began to be about the British, about the French, about the Danish, about the Belgian press, and so on, in such a way that you are not allowed to see the world except through Eurocentric universalism that refuses to see anyone else other than itself. So the Bisht actually is a symbolic representation of this notion of refusing to see the world in any other way other than what European or global North sees it. And at the end of the day, we need to ask, did Messi see this as ruining the moment of the World Cup? The Argentinian team, did they see this ruining the World Cup? The Argentinian society, fans, and so on in Argentina, did they see this as ruining their World Cup moment? If they said it did not, and they feel honored by it, then it's none of your business. Like, why don't you just, at one point you need just to be quiet, and it's not about you, and maybe you need to take a 12-step program to get you what cultural recognition, cultural awareness is all about. And the world is larger than UK or Europe in general. The world is far more wide, spaces, and complex in that way. So our number one Islamophobic moment in 2022 is the World Cup, for all the elements that came together to push some of the most pernicious, malicious, and discriminatory Islamophobic framing that will take a considerable period of time to undo. Not wanting to be in a negative ending, I would say that Qatar's hosting of a World Cup and people coming and engaging and relating and having relations with the Arab and Muslim world within the framework of the Arab and Muslim world, both in all environments, was something that had a transformative moment. And that also gets us why, in both in Europe and part in the United States, they didn't air the opening ceremonies or the closing ceremonies of the World Cup because, again, it was not about them. But all those who came and engaged the Arab world within the Arab world and within the Arab and Muslim world and engaged with them culturally, socially, and so on, I would say that that moment has been transformative. And I would say that the residues and the outcome possibly will have as lasting effect as possible. So thank you for listening and being with me. We will be sending out the 10 Islamophobic moments of 2022, and we'll share it on our email and website. Be sure to continue to be engaging with us on the Islamophobia Studies Center. Thank you. Wish all of you the best, and hopefully we'll see you again in a future broadcast. Salam alaikum.